Hi, welcome to Create Love Arts. My name is Sharon, and today we're going to talk yardage. How much do you need for a project? So there are multiple answers to this question, and I want to simplify it for everyone in a different way. And I want to show you some different pattern material lists, not the full pattern, just the material list to show you how it can be indicated on each different kind of pattern. First of all, it doesn't matter if you're using a 0 weight or a 6 or 7 weight and anything in between. All of those labels should have your yardage on them, and they're going to be in different spots. So I'll show you how to find that. But the yardage per hank, ball, skein, cake, hank, whatever you are calling it, for each bundle of yarn is going to be different. Each individual company does them differently. It depends on the weight of the yarn. It depends on the size of the yarn, how that company chooses to roll it up, and how much they can fit in grams or ounces. So for a certain specification industry-wide, they all do different things. So you're really going to need to look at the label when you buy something or when you want to start a new pattern project, because each one of them will have different indications about how much you need. With that said, how much you need per pattern is going to depend on which hook you're using, and also on your tension, because that's going to play a role in how much yarn you do or do not use. So whenever a pattern gives you an amount to go by, that's an estimate. And as someone who has made this heartbreaking mistake before with a yarn that was discontinued, I promise you it is so much easier on yourself in many multiple ways if you just, when you're buying yarn for a specific pattern and it tells you to buy a certain amount, buy one extra of each color you need. And I know that's not always cost efficient for everyone, and I get it. I choose personally, I like to buy, if I'm going to buy yarn, I'm going to buy something that gives me more bang for my buck. I don't tend to shop at the higher end yarn stores, although I think they're wonderful, they're glorious. I personally can't always afford it. And so to me, I love hitting the clearance aisle. I love hitting the sales. I like looking at Goodwill and seeing if I can't find a good bargain there. I have other people who search and like to send me yarn, which is fantastic. I appreciate it more than life itself. But with that comes, when you have multiple different things of yarn in different sizes, but not enough of any of them, it becomes a little tricky to pick a good pattern for it. So my suggestion is, if you are buying yarn for a specific pattern that you want to try, then go above and beyond what you're expected to use. And here's how you find that information. So for each one of these, this is a thread. It's lace weight thread. And it's a number 10 size thread. And this is common for doilies and for some clothing and stuff. On this, the yardage isn't listed where your hook size and weight sizes. It's usually on a little sticker somewhere else on there. So like this one says it's 350 yards. Now I've used a bit of this, so I know that's wrong. But it also gives you the meterage. So meters and yards, one is, metric, the other one is standard. So yards being 350, I know if I see a pattern that needs 800, I can't get away with just buying one of these. I need 2 or more. So there's that one. This is a 2 weight. It says right there it's a 2 weight. And then on here, it gives you the yardage of 312 yards. Now you can go by meters if that's your, preferred method of measure. But for my purposes, I use the 312 yards, and I know that that's all I'm going to get out of this. So if I only have one or two, a smaller project is going to be all I can do with this, especially since it was on clearance. So I know I'm not going to find it anywhere else easily. And then you have the big cakes like this. These are, and probably always will be, one of my favorite things to work with. It's a 3-weight yarn, but it's got a lot of yardage in it. So I know 590 yards, one of these will make me a full scarf, all out full scarf. But I also know that these go on sale a lot, and when they do, stock up, because that's a lot of yardage for, it's a big bang for your buck. I can say the same thing about this. It's a 4-weight with 1,020 yards. So you don't need, this is the Pound of Love. I adore these for the fact that they're soft enough. They do wash well. And beyond that, this is not an advertisement for them. I'm just saying that yardage is fantastic. And when you can find the big balls like this, or the big, I made mine into a cake, but when you find them big like this, they're amazing for blankets and bigger sweater projects, okay? Like you only need 2 for a sweater, and that's saying something, because those can run a lot of yards. But then you have these little guys that you use for kitchen products mostly. Well, you can use them for anything, but these little guys are only going to have, and again, you have to find it. There's your weight in ounces and grams, but down in that tiny little spot, it says 120 yards. That's not very much. So it depends on the weight of your yarn as to how many yards they're going to get in there. And here we go to a number 5. This one is a 5-weight bulky. You're not going to find a lot of yardage in these 5 bulkies. They're 109, just because they don't sell them in really big skeins or balls or what have you. Sometimes they can. It's just, that's a lot of yarn. You don't need as much of these to make bigger projects because they're bigger yarn. So that's 81 yards on that one. So, and then you've got this stuff. Okay, I did want to touch on this. These furry yarns, or decorative yarns, or fashion yarns, you're going to see that it's like a cord that has the fur attached to it. The cord itself is very thin. It's really not much of a piece of yarn. But because of the added, texture and fluff of the fur, or the faux fur, it looks thicker than it really is. And so the projects work up to be thicker than a regular yarn. So your yardage on this is going to be quite low, because they don't sell them in really big things that I'm aware of. I'm sure they do somewhere. But for all intents and purposes, for our purposes, we're looking at that 120 yards. And this is why. When you go to a pattern, and this one was for a basket and some little washcloths, or little washcloths for this. It's telling you need you need about 230 yards for one part of it. And then this is how some of them look, because we're not all professional pattern creators. And this one, you'll need 236 yards. Actually, you're going to need 450 yards of each one. But one of the things you need to caution yourself, see how it lists all these different colors? You're going to need that, but for each color, one skein. And sometimes, like this one, they give you the pattern or the brand name they used in yarn, and how many yards or meters you're going to need for that particular brand. And so you'd need 2 balls, 3 balls, 2 balls in each different color. Now, if you choose to not do 4 colors on that project, you're going to have to do some math. And all that means is you're going to compare your label. So this is a 4-weight yarn. And I know that just because I have the pattern. But that 4-weight yarn of Red Heart with Love is 370 yards per ball. I have 1,020 on this. If I wanted to use these, I definitely could. I would just have to do the math to make sure I have enough. And that's the trick. That's all it really means. Now, if I were to take, and this is a more generic style. It says you're going to need 1,600 yards of worsted weight. So that's going to be a 4-weight yarn. You're going to need 1,600 yarns. This is a big blanket. And with that 1,600 yards, if you change colors, you're going to need to do the math on how many color changes you're going to do and how much yarn you're going to need for each one of those pieces of it. I'm not going to do that. And then I found this beauty. This is actually for a cover-up. And this pattern designer, and I'm not giving the pattern name out or anything like that. The pattern designer did all the work for you. It's amazing because she took and broke it all down by size and then gave you the measurements that it will turn out and how many yards of your main color and contrast color you're going to need. When I see patterns like this, I get very excited because this just makes it so much easier. But they don't all do this. And so I took the liberty of going to Lion Brand. Lion Brand Yarn has some really cool stuff on their website, and I highly suggest you go check them out because they give you, for each different size weight of yarn, they give you an estimate of how many you're going to need in yards for each project that you might like to do. This is still subjective. Again, it will depend on your hook size and your weight, the weight of the yarn that you're using. So those are just some of the things that I wanted you to be aware of. But when you're doing an actual pattern, a good example would be this as a generic amount. When you are doing a pattern that says something like this, what I tend to do is I take that 1,600 yards and I figure whatever the ball of yarn I'm using. So say I'm using one of these and that's 1,020. I'm making it really easy on myself. Say I'm using one of these for this particular pattern and I know I need 1,600 yards. 2 of these should be plenty. Now, if I had, and that would give me plenty, that would give me a lot of leeway, at least 580 yards of leeway. And to me, that's a pretty big difference, so that when, if my tension is different or my hook size had to change because I wasn't comfortable with the hook size that they suggested with this particular yarn, I have room to move. Now, with that said, you do not necessarily, you're not always going to get the yardage. Sometimes they'll just tell you how many balls of a certain brand they used, and sometimes you have to look up how many yards that brand has. And so it becomes a little bit of an investigative journey, but at the end of the day, once you get going on stuff and really figuring out how you sink or swim, sometimes you sink or swim, and the less you make those mistakes, the better your life will be, I promise. So that's really what I wanted to go over today, was just how to find that information and why it's important. You do not want to run out of yarn, especially a discontinued yarn or something that you picked up on sale somewhere that no longer may be. They also, some yarns have lot numbers on them. Not all, some of them aren't listed that way, but this particular one has a lot number. That lot number means it's the same color dye for each one of the skeins that has that lot number on it. And they can be different even in the same color. So it's important to give that a quick peek as well when you are grabbing a new yarn up. If you order a yarn online, typically they'll do their very best when they're shipping it to find you the amount of skeins you need with the same lot numbers across all of your balls. They can't guarantee that though. That just is when that dye lot, when this yarn was made, that's the die lot they used. And so there can be slight variations between lots. And I've seen it a billion times where, especially whites and creams, they look the same in the store. And then you get it home and you put them side by side and you can totally see a big difference. So keep that in mind when you're looking. You're going to look at your yardage for a pattern. And when you're picking up yarn for that, if it has a lot number, give that a check and see that the ones you bought all match up. And if they don't, just give them a real close as best you can inspection and try to get them as close as possible. You can even do one lot number ball and then add on the next lot number and then just go back and forth so it at least repeats into a pattern. But that's the best advice I can give for yardage and for lot die numbers. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I really appreciate you guys liking and subscribing and following me on all the social media. And I really appreciate being here. Thank y'all for hanging out with me and learning a little bit about the beginner's crochet lessons. Have a great day.